Well, hello, friend.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
Very well. Good to see you.
You are in Arizona now. You just travel all over the place.
Oh, this is actually Utah. So this
Oh,
is, what is the name of this actual place? It's outside of Zion National Park, but I can't remember the Sand Hollow is the name of the
oh,
little place we're in.
yeah.
But it does very look very Arizona-esque.
Yeah. Do you take these pictures yourself?
Yes. Yeah, this
Nice.
one. Hey, friends. Good to see you guys. I'm actually run out of pictures now. I need to go back through our cross-country trip to see if there's any others, but this is my last background that I had curated for all this stuff. So I'll have to find some
Nice.
new ones.
Or you need to go out and take some more pictures.
That's very true. And I have done that, but I did not catch any this last week when we were away. So I was actually near snow. I stood on snow, friends.
Wow.
Whoa, how'd that feel?
Temperatures reached down to 17 degrees Fahrenheit at one point. Of course, I wasn't awake during that time. That was the evening. They rose, overnight. They rose to probably, I think our lowest high was somewhere around 42, 43. So still above freezing.
Yeah. Yep. Well, we're experiencing great weather here. It's just hanging around freezing right about now. Maybe, I don't know, 35. Feels really good to have it that warm.
Yeah, because of that, I stayed in almost the entire time that we were away. So,
Do you know what winter boots are? Yeah, winter coats. Do you know what those are?
yeah, I mean,
Toques. You know what a toque is?
I do know what a toque is, actually. Yeah. So I wear my beanie all the time. That's what we call it.
A beanie. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we have all of those, but they're more like accessories, than they are like essential.
It's for skaters.
Funny. Hey, will John be joining us today? I can't recollect.
No, he's in Pennsylvania.
That's
visiting a new grandson.
And then will he be on next week for our last one?
Probably.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, he gave me a schedule, but I couldn't remember it off the top of my head how it played out back.
Now, Michael, you had on your outline next week as a leadership huddle, and then the December 6th is a final huddle.
Oh, perfect. Okay, I was off then. I didn't look back at it right before we jumped on, so I had it in my memory as just the last two. That's right, because we were going to wrap up with the strategic huddle. Okay, good. Well, I think, beginning with that end in mind, last week, for those that were here, we looked at 5 V's, and it felt like, from my perspective, that in a large way, though that maybe not be completely buttoned down for you guys as a whole denomination, there's actually a lot more ground that you guys have taken in that area than I think I had expected. So that felt like that was covered in a lot of ways, and it feels like it's in that natural stage of progression. I'd still suggest that that's a priority, and I would suggest that both your leadership pipelines and your 5 V's get synced up, so that, again, you're pruning away things that don't need to be there, so you're as lightweight as possible, not deploying vehicles that don't need to be there, and everything is going toward the outcomes that you want to move toward. I think that type of alignment is just really critical and helpful. But again, it feels like, at least for our purposes, that development is probably as far along as it's going to need to go. So then what I did is, in that last assignment, I'm really kind of thinking, okay, we've got 3 weeks left. I want to just try to, help with that baton time coming, to be able to put it back into your hands and think about things like, you're in a season, you're getting ready to jump in, multiplication, what will the next wave of growth look like? What kind of capacity is possible as you guys expand and multiply? And then I'm also thinking, just opening up the conversation to what else do you need to discuss? What else do you want to pick into more fully? So it may be that, though I give an assignment like today, that could be that we wrap that one up relatively quickly. So think through what other types of questions do you want to talk through at a practical level. It feels like almost every time that we've walked away with comments where people have said, oh, that was really helpful. It's when we get really practical nuts and bolts, and that's usually way off kind of our scope and sequence. So, you know how it is, right?
Rabbit trails.
I've noticed that it's most of the time it's the failures that are helpful, because you're like, oh, that makes sense. We face some of those same frustrations as well. So if there's any of that kind of stuff, think it through. You know, this is the difficulty, right, of conscious competence or unconscious competence, is you don't always know which direction to go. And I think that's where scope and sequence and those practical realities really come into play. So here's what my thoughts are. I'm going to pull up the whiteboard in just a little bit. I'm going to put those questions in here. In fact, let me grab them because I don't have them copied here. I'll put them onto the whiteboard, and then we'll just kind of systematically work through one person at a time to give you a chance to listen to one another in these kind of 3 critical next step areas, especially with the vehicle of Huddle. And then we'll look to see if there's any kairos out of that. And then from there, we'll open it up with any extra time with kind of general questions. So anything to clarify or point out before I jump in and take the screen over? All right, here we go. Okay, so I think I can just cut and paste. Yes. These are the questions that we will work through today. I'm hoping that, one, this gives me the chance to listen to you guys and where you're at, provide some strategic kind of coaching input into any of these things, but also for you to hear one another, just in case this isn't something that has been dialed down. It does feel like, you know, as my huddles are winding down, and I know you guys are in somewhat of a similar season with a future relaunch for a next season, this is just that time frame to do some reflection, observation in terms of helping to the planning for next time. So how about a brave volunteer to go first for us? I'll write your name down, and then I'll start taking notes on those 3. Whose huddle will you be in after our LC huddle finishes? That may not be an answer that you have yet, but again, I think that's one I want to continue to provoke. You know, we've got to be sheep from the front as we're shepherds from the back. How many huddles will you launch next season? Who will be in those huddles? I want to get as specific, excuse me, as possible on those. And then who in your huddle orbit is closest to launching their own huddles? What do they need in order to launch? So who is our brave soul?
I suppose for this first one, each one of us, we just had an RM call earlier this morning, and we discussed this a little bit with no, you know, immediate decisions, other than we do intend to have some sort of huddle. I think we were talking about whether it'll be strategic in focus, as you've been doing with us, Michael, and whether or not you would maybe consult with us on that. Again, these are just ideas that we're talking about. There was another idea of family on mission, which I think, which is our 7th marker. We're participating in a community of followers of Jesus on mission to the world, and that we probably need some more emphasis on that and focus on that. So that was another one. Some character or mentoring formation, even self-huddling just with the RMs were discussed, but we didn't really come out with some final outcomes other than we do want to huddle.
I love that. Good. Yep. I think the key one is we will continue to use huddle. The challenge that you may face is that, excuse me, I've got this tickle in my throat. I did come down with a cold last week. So I'm on the very tail end.
I was just wondering if we should all mask up now.
Please.
But
so if I have to keep clear my throat, I'm sorry for that. But I think, yes, we will use huddle. How will we do it, and who will lead it? you're used to for right now being led, and you're led as a group. I know that you guys have, your leaders amongst peers, but you're going to wrestle through some of that. So, you may assign somebody to lead a certain segment for a period of time, knowing that that person won't be the huddle leader for life. Or you may defer to John's, interim role. You have that kind of role and responsibility. We're going to look to you to do that. But I think that's going to be a critical piece even before you get to what you will do. But I like the way that you're thinking about what will we do. And what I'm seeing, even in what you outlined here, is that, you want huddle is great because you can increase accountability in certain areas. And so we want an outcome from this next season. Again, maybe set it for 6 weeks and then reevaluate, your 6 months and then reevaluate. We want to increase accountability around blank, blank, and blank. What I then heard you state, Brian, is that family on mission continues to be a weak area. So that could be, we want to even strategically press into family on mission and increase some accountability to see some growth there. What I have done in the past, this is where I've done like a modified huddle. You may choose the book Family on Mission, which you may have read through together, but just go through sequentially and really kind of create your own content around all of that. So, whether you do 1 or 2 chapters at a time, this is kind of how I developed those. We're going to focus on content, and then we're going to look at this from a discipleship angle, and then we're going to look at this from a leadership angle. That's the module breakdown that I do. Sometimes I might combine discipleship and leadership, but if you work through that, you'll find and mine Kairos about how you can increase the accountability in an area that you want to develop more. So again, I just want to state, I think that idea hits on multiple factors that you're kind of outlining right here. If you wanted to choose a specific set, let's say, you went with, I don't remember where it fits, but in your Way of Jesus markers, there are some very specific character items. I do want to remind you, character tended not to be the area of weakness. It was more competencies that tended to be areas of weakness. So I'm wondering if character or competency around specific markers or items in there that you wanted to push for growth could be another way to then get strategic, increase accountability on an area that you want to be able to grow in. So it could be that you itemize things like that. The last one is that if you're really pushing for a lot of growth, let's say that out of the other questions that we're going to look at, you really notice, our key marker is we have got to multiply to X amount of number of huddles, and we want to see that many more huddle leaders. We're going to increase our bandwidth and push to lead more huddles than we have in the past. Then that might mean you're going to emphasize so much here that it might be very beneficial, I'll choose a different color here, to make your huddle that you're going to be in more relational. We're going to share more of kind of like our personal life and some of those things that we haven't tapped into in the past. And we're just going to support one another while we push into that growth. So again, if you chose Family on Mission, you're going to be trying to take new territory in an area, and you're going to increase accountability, knowing this has been difficult for us to move forward in. If you choose something like character and skills around Way of Jesus, again, you're going to take new territory and push further into it. If your territory is, growth in another way, you can use the huddle just to meet the need. We want to continue to connect, and it can feel very different, each one of those huddles. And that's how I might determine, what do we need most? This is strategic planning. What do we need most? And then how will that huddle help support that end game?
That's good. Can I ask a question?
Yep.
So when you're, okay, maybe I'm misunderstanding what you mean by growth. Is that personal growth, relational growth, or is it like you kind of had a few different things there, like multiplied huddles. Okay, that helps me. And then you connected it to a relational type grouping. So
yes. The reason why I did that is this is going to take more energy out of you, and I wouldn't suggest new content at that point, because you're going to be, you'll be, I don't want to say overwhelmed, but there's going to be a new pressure. I would suggest you're pushing forward with what you already know how to do, and you're going to discover your unconscious incompetence. You're going to wrestle through that. You're going to be going through new D2 phases together. Then let this be relational and support one another. So this is calibration of invitation in huddle, while one of your key strategic plans is to multiply huddles and huddle leaders.
Okay.
And again, I know that this is going to be a goal of yours, but if this were a primary goal and you recognize we are going to expend a lot of time and energy in this, and that's what we need to do, then let's counter that with a less stressful push in our huddle.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is, yeah, as Brian said, we just had this conversation a few hours ago. So this is like the what, but your question is who, whose huddle will you be in? And I think when we talked about that, it was, I don't know that we actually stated it this way, but in my way of thinking, it's who's ahead of us, who has the skill set that we can model, who's already doing this, that's doing it well, that we can learn from. And actually some names did come up of, who in the character area, who in the skill area, who in the, strategy area. So we did have names, but it was who are people that are there that we can, so it's not coaching. It's actually more of a mentoring huddle in my mind, because, we're asking someone who is down the road ahead of us to help us get to where, they are, where we need to go. So that's just that's the who part of it.
Yeah, I like that.
And so we can copy we can imitate what they're doing. Yep. That's a piece that we for sure want.
Yep, absolutely.
Like a family on mission, for instance.
Yeah, and I think what I was outlining up here probably had more to do with the assumption that one of you would take the leadership of the next huddle, or John would. So I think I was mapping out what that might look like. Now, you can still employ this stuff here and invite somebody externally to come in and say, hey, here's what we really want to focus in on. We've selected you to be able to do all that. Could be very, very beneficial. But I think I had that governing assumption while I was itemizing those things.
Yeah, we did mention that too. We could do our self huddle, the 4 RMs, each one takes something. And so that's that line that you just put across there. So that was another who is us.
Yeah.
And
I think, honestly, there is a skill set that you have to learn and how to huddle yourselves to. So again, this is going to go back to if growth and we're going to employ what we already know, then I'd suggest don't bring in an outsider for that. Learn how to be able to lead yourselves in, and have somebody lead the huddle for 6 months and submit to their leadership and give them that responsibility to lead the whole group forward. It would be more relationally focused, and you're kind of just, calibrating invitation challenge that way. But there is a skill. Here's my point. There is a skill set in learning how to be able to do that and not relying upon somebody from the outside solely to be there. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. You use those each at different times, but that's an important skill to develop. All right. So Brian, let me turn back to you. I'm going to draw the line here. That I feel like for the most part works through that first question. And that does give us a little bit of a sense of global input from all of you guys that way. Why don't you go through, Brian, specifically, how many huddles is Brian going to launch next season? Who do you plan to have be in those huddles? And then who in your orbit is closest? Kind of work through those for us.
So it was an interesting question for me because right now I am formally leading 3 huddles. And each one of those huddles are at different stages.
Yep.
So one is at, a coaching stage, been together for 3 years. One is at kind of a 2nd year stage, and one is at a 1st year stage.
Good.
And so for me at this moment, I was thinking, I'm kind of loaded with my capacity, and if I start thinking about the next one, I'm gonna kind of go boom. So honestly, I put down, I don't have nothing anything new at the agenda, and I'm probably thinking 6 months. Okay, so in the next 6 months, I'm going to continue to filter with these present huddles, and working with them at these different stages. And then when I probably come into summer, fall, I'll be looking at launching. So that's personally where I would be at.
Good. Give us an idea. Ideally, how many would you like to launch in summer, fall?
I would like to add either 1 or 2 on the one. Here's something that's just popped into my mind. One on a with pastors, fellow pastors around the area, and one I'd like to focus on in the local church. And see if I can come up with something in the local church, just to be aware. I would work with the pastoral staff at my local church on that. But there's something in me that says, I've been doing these Zoom conversations for so long that I wonder what it would look like for me to be in a local context, hopefully beyond COVID, that we would actually do a face-to-face meeting on a regular basis and see where that would go. So that would put me at 2 at the moment. That would be where I would be looking at.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you're currently at 3, recognizing some capacity limitations. There's the possibility you may add 1 or 2 extras to put you at 4 or 5 total. So there is
I'd probably be so the one coaching one is once a month at the moment. We might go back to once every 2 weeks, but that's just I'm thinking of moving the others back to maybe a once a month or once every 2 weeks. So it's not a weekly commitment again, and I'd shift those, right? So I would have a few more huddles, but my time into those huddles would be similar for my capacity.
That's good. And I think that has to do with recognizing what season is a huddle in. Does it need to decrease? Does it need to increase? Okay, great. What about the last one? Who in your huddle orbit is closest to launching their own huddles? What do they need in order to launch?
Yeah, so all of my coaching ones have their own huddles. In fact, one of them is, instead of adding staff to his church, he decided to call out some interns from within his own church. And so he's got 3 interns that he is huddling with and also developing, pastoral stuff. And I'm just amazed at that. It's something just that he's done. So each one of that group has it. My second level group in my second year, 2 people are starting their huddles already, and moving in on that. And then my first year.
Let me pause and just ask them. So with those 2 groups that are already running some, how many total people is that? Or total huddles, I guess.
Oh, okay. I'd say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, probably 8, 9, 10. I would say around 11 or 12 huddles beyond me. So that's second generation huddles. And these can range, some of them would have 2, 3, others would have 7 and 8 people in their huddles.
That's really good. Okay. That's currently perfect. And then I stopped you. You were going to add something else in there after you talked about a second group and a couple of people leading huddles there.
Oh yeah, sorry. I included those in, so my my kind of, I'll put it this way. My 3-year guys Um, they have probably 7 huddles. My second year guys are probably the other come up to 11 or 12 huddles that they're doing, and then my first year guys are not. They're just in the midst of starting to think about who in my local congregation could I huddle.
Good. How many guys are in that category then? Thinking about it and ready to launch sometime in the near future.
Okay, right now I'd have 4 to 5, yeah. So.
Great, Brian. That's amazing. 11.
Yeah, actually, when you put it down, I was surprised when we were writing it out. Yeah, it is amazing.
That's really good. And then to think that you're on the cusp of these 4 other leaders and the multiplication capacity that's inside of there, I think that's really great. I think another thing I'm recognizing, Brian, is that there's probably a lot of unconscious competence that you've gained by producing this. And so it would probably be good if the rest of the team to pull some of that out. I know that there's going to be things to celebrate on your list as well. You might pull some of that out because honestly, those are pretty stellar numbers. I would have expected a greater failure rate just from my own experience, both personally and what I've watched other people lead into. So something in here that's worth minding out is, what do these people that are doing this carry? And how did they become the right types of people from a 4C's capacity? What was going on in there? And this could be or what's Brian doing that's making such a huge success rate happen? Because that's pretty darn good.
So I would just add, I'm experiencing in my first year huddle more of a couple people dropping off.
Okay.
And that is something that I've not really experienced before.
Okay.
And so that brings reality into it, right? Is just, there is that reality that, and most of that, and it's making me rethink, actually, I've been going over the last week over those, the 4C's and then the readiness and availability stuff, and how I actually chose those leaders, and going, I probably have to reflect on that a little. It's not that you're going to have 100% all the time, but I just am experiencing it, and it's heightened my awareness of that again.
That's really good. How would you address this then in a couple of ways? This last question, what do they need in order to launch? What have you discovered people need from the past when they were ready to launch? And what do you foresee this next group of 4 needing?
Yeah. So we've yet to have a strategic huddle. It usually came after we had a couple strategic huddles in the first year that I certainly started to challenge more on, who are you thinking about? Who are the people of peace? Who are those connectors? So we've yet to do that. We're probably right after Christmas, we'll head into a strategic huddle. And that'll be a starting point to lay some seeds, more seeds towards where can we go to launching.
That's really good. That's really good. Yep, I think that's exactly, again, a strategy, one that you've already walked into and you have experience with. And I think you're spelling out exactly the types of things that people tend to need on that front end. If you didn't do that, you would likely have people sign up for your huddle again and not take steps. And so here's something that I've experienced kind of from my areas of, I guess, failure or frustration, probably more, is that when I would launch and move my first tier of people through, I wouldn't see this number of huddles on the opposite side because the people I was huddling had a small capacity. And so that's where I'm noticing there's something specific about the people you have. Either you had massive amount of trust with them because you've been with them a long time and you were able to build off of that, which is what I showed up lacking in many of those relationships. Or those people were just very high caliber. My people I didn't have as much time with them, so I was using those to build trust, and then they just didn't have the same capacity. They were afraid. So what I would have added down here on mine is I have to learn how to be able to deal with people's actual fears and practical hindrances that will keep them from punting this further and further and not actually taking steps that way. So you might, Brian, experience that more with this last group where you're saying some people are dropping off, that you just might realize these people have just a smaller capacity. I have to coach them differently and not be frustrated. I want to launch them, right? I've cast the vision, I've done it, I've given you everything that I've got, now go do this. You know, that is a difficult thing for me as a leader to be able to face.
Yeah.
All right, let's turn to somebody else. Walk us through some of these things that Brian's walked us through here.
I can go next. So I currently have 2 huddles. First group is Nathan and Carter, who went through basically the 3DM stuff. So I just finished up with them, kind of, we didn't go into some of the last stuff that you've been covering with us. So, but we kind of stopped that just a month or so ago. And so now, so they have 2 years. So they both have, they've been huddling in their own local context. And so some changes there. For one, Nathan has become a lead pastor now just recently. So his capacity has really tightening up. Some of the things that I'd hoped for him is really getting restricted. We're looking at moving to every 2 weeks into the new year, which is probably what I would be doing anyways, as they're doing this. And so what we're actually going through now is actually kind of the EMC's Way of Jesus scope and sequence that I'm going through with them. So, which is kind of a hybrid with some 3DM tools and Way of Jesus language. The other group is 3 pastors, all were youth pastors. Just in the last month, had one of our guys resign from his church, took a secular job, and we haven't been able to find a schedule that works. So he's stopped meeting with us. So I'm checking in with him, kind of just doing some one-on-one check-ins with him. He's pumped. Like he is, he's listening to several podcasts on disciple making a week or a day, I think, or I'm not sure if it's a day, but I mean, he's driving to work and driving home, listening to podcasts on disciple making. So he's just into it. He's got, he was a youth pastor, so he redesigned the youth ministry. It's all running now on huddles. He's got lay people. So he's kind of trained his youth sponsors, lay the youth sponsors, how to lead huddles. So they're huddling it, did that all over COVID summer. And so leads his own group. His wife leads a group. So she leads a group on one night in the house. He's out in his shop. They're out in the country in a farm. Wow. And so he is just, he was so excited about resigning ministry so he could disciple. So he's just running with it. So he's going to do okay, I think. I need to be more structured with him, or more regular check-in. I think that, so just so I don't leave him sink or swim. So anyway, so he's gone off and doing that.
Claire, try to provide a number. So you listed one he's leading, one his wife's leading, or around how many do you think you have in that youth ministry?
How many that he would have? Oh, I don't. There would probably be 5 or 6 in that one church with their youth group. I think is what that would be. Probably just 5, I guess. One of the groups didn't work well because the leader.
I got it. Someone's at the door. I'll be right back.
The one leader over the summer wasn't convinced of this model, and anyway, so that's kind of been a failure, but I think this fall they got a different person, or they've worked through that, and they're getting a little better success. So that's all in one local church context.
Yeah.
So then that's my one. Well, that's just the second huddle. So the other two guys now that we're starting our second year around. So we're again, like I went through with the second group that I've just completed a year with. Well, it was in the fall, I completed a year with them. And so we had basically gone through the Way of Jesus scope and sequence with them. And so I didn't know what to do, but so we kind of agreed together that we would go back through the scope and sequence again.
Okay.
And I had them share some of the leadership of the scope and sequence as we went through, but this time now they are taking turns leading. And with Rob leaving our group, they said, like, this is too good to not have others join us. And so I don't know how this is going to work, but we're talking, we've got one guy recruited already, a lay person out of one of our guys' churches. So he's kind of prepping. He's a student. He's going through Bible school. So he wants to be in ministry, and he's married. He's mature. And so we got him recruited. Plus we have another Bible school student that we're thinking about. So we're looking at bringing these two guys in to this huddle. And so they're going to, and I think we'll see how this works. So I'll have them lead, and I can be observing actually and seeing how they're doing. And it pulls in a couple more. So it's kind of like a half new group, I guess, is what I'm thinking there. And then I hope in the new year to launch one more myself with some pastors. I think I got bandwidth for that. But I don't know who they are yet. I've been praying through that, reading over the names of my pastors and praying through, and trying to discern who those right people are. But that'll probably be just a group of 3 or 4. Like I prefer smaller numbers. So anyway, so that's kind of where I'm at, if that makes sense.
Yep, that does. That's really good. Let me just analyzing this. So let me just commend this. The strategy that you maybe feel like you're stumbling into is really good. Where you're taking what I'm calling a hybrid there. You can come up with whatever term, but you've got this group of people that you're recognizing need more modeling and support, and they need to practice it in a safe place. So you're giving them D3, D4 experience. You're going to step back, do less, and empower them, but you're going to be there, for them to fall back upon. And the idea that you're actually bringing in new people is good, because it will make it feel less sterile and stale, and it'll feel real. At the same time, you're going to be meeting that need of introducing brand new people to the content. So that's actually a really, really good strategy. I'm excited to hear you say that. Again, notice there's tons of ways to be able to move forward in that.
And so those also are in they have huddles in their own youth group as well. So that like they are leading there, which I can observe. I don't observe, I just get anecdotal stuff from there. But so anyway, so that's it. That's good. I was feeling for a while, Michael, discouraged. Like I thought, oh man, it's like some of this is actually now starting to fall. I thought I was moving forward for momentum. I felt like it was falling apart. And now I don't think so much. So it's just a shift, and looks a little differently. So I'm trying to adapt with it.
That's good. Let's itemize. You said they have that group. They had their own kind of youth ministry huddles. How many would you think would be in there?
Yeah. What does James have? So they're not quite as structured. They still do. So they have. So their huddles. So I would just say one each. Let's just put it that way. I would just use one each is what they really have. And that's really what they've been working on. So, and their youth ministry is kind of a hybrid. They're doing some learning circle stuff with them, but it's not, I wouldn't call it a huddle. It's kind of more like a small group thing. So they have a few that each are working with. So one each is what those two would have.
So that's total.
And then they're doing, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think too, even just to comment on that, sometimes when people step out and launch, they launch something that they feel that they'll be successful at. So that's what I've noticed with people who are afraid. Let me do this thing, and I'm going to use your language, and I'm going to use a lot of what you did with me, but I'm going to do this thing in a way that I'm a little bit more comfortable with. What they usually find out is that it doesn't have enough accountability. It devolves back into kind of more discussion oriented. That's okay. People have to stumble through that kairos. And so I find that as long as I stay in contact with them about that, it gives them the place to be able to confront that on their own. I may front load that and say, hey, you may discover this as you do this. But again, sometimes that's a way people will kind of cope with that struggle. Great. Let me just ask this question too. Brian, when you hear Clarence talk about the way of Jesus scope and sequence, is that what you're leading people through? So these people here that are leading 11 to 12, they've gone through kind of a similar scope and sequence, and they're kind of leading some of those things out as well?
Yeah, so all of the people that I've started with the way of Jesus scope and sequence.
Perfect.
I'm bringing back, actually, the second year guys. Right now, we're going back to empowering missional disciples. Yeah, and I've told them there's some going back to it because we've used some of it, but it's also increasing. And then the third year guys, I'm actually thinking of introducing multiplying missional leaders to them, because they're at that stage where I really do think that would be very, very helpful to them. But I've always started with the way of Jesus. And again, that was just my innovation.
I know, that's great. I think that makes sense. I just wanted to, I think when I heard you say all of this, and I didn't hear a way of Jesus scope and sequence, I had other assumptions. So I just wanted to make sure either you guys are on the same page or just the recognition that you guys are on different pages. But I think that's great. What I'll oftentimes use too, Brian, instead of multiplying missional leaders, is family on mission. But that's because I've decided that that's where they need to grow in more. They need more of that nuanced family on mission because they're working at the local level. Oftentimes that's what's needed. If it's a lead pastor, multiplying missional leaders is really helpful because it's so like detailed structural content. It really helps them get around all of those. How will we make this thing work? It begins to tease those things out. So, all right, Mr. Lynn, walk us through yours, please.
Yeah, so right now I have two huddles. One is a classic Way of Jesus scope and sequence huddle. And the other huddle is meeting with some RMAs, regional minister assistants, and I'm using a hybrid with content with those guys. And then I will be launching another huddle next season, one more huddle. We have something in our, in our EMCC family, something called Disciple Making Leaders. And it's a network of disciple making leaders. We would call them church planters in another generation, but they're disciple making leaders. I actually was going to start with huddling my disciple making leaders and working with disciple making, but in poking around with those guys, I'm finding a little bit of pushback. They are like, they're so far out there cutting edge. I'm not sure that they kind of look at me sideways like, well, okay, well, I'll consider joining a disciple making huddle, but I'm already doing disciple making. So I think I've got some work to do to figure out if that disciple making leader, those 6 in my region, are actually my target group. You know,
Okay.
I'm looking for the 4 C's and then the availability and the second filter,
Readiness and availability.
readiness and availability. Yeah.
Let me
So I
speak-
think, yeah, go ahead.
Let me speak into that one. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you've got a group of leaders, high levels of capacity. They're doing the types of things that you would denominationally want to see them do.
Right.
But the content that you would normally bring to them is at a lower level or at a different place than what is useful for them. Am I hearing that correctly?
I'm starting to think so. I'm starting to wonder if a Way of Jesus scope and sequence is the content that I'd want to connect, because I'm wanting to network with them more regularly, my disciple making leaders, but I'm not sure a huddle format, and in particular a Way of Jesus scope and sequence format, is where they're at, what they would need.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways, it was just it was a kind of like, whoa, I
Yeah.
was running full bore into this and going, oh, wait a minute,
Yeah.
this might not be where they're at.
And so here was my suggestion. One is that even if people feel like, well, why do I need to be in a disciple making huddle when I'm already doing that? You know, we all know I need support. A leader needs support while they're doing that. And so again, it's the calibration of invitation and challenge. You're doing this high challenge things. I'd like to be able to provide some support because I know it's difficult to maintain that. And I'd like to provide that support in community so that you're not alone. You've got a group of people. There's a band of brothers that you have. So again, notice that's very covenantal language. It's more invitational in nature. And inevitably, you know, those of us that tend to do that kind of stuff, we're already doing it. We have a lot of pride and ego, and there's a lot of gaps. And so you may find that you just have to gently bring in information, and it really is helpful for them. They maybe missed it along the way. This is where I've used things like the character and skills questions as what I've called that meat and potatoes type huddle. You're already doing the stuff. I don't need to bring new content to you, but I want us to have some kind of framework to work through. And so now we're doing really this kind of meat and potatoes huddle. What I know is inside of that, though, is all the language I really want them to know. So I'm going to teach them the language in a little bit more subtle way and just support them with what they're already doing. So
yeah, that's helpful, Michael, because what that does is I want to ramp up my networking with these disciple making leaders. My strategy was Way of Jesus Huddle, but I'm wondering if there's another way to act like, and I appreciate your comments there, to actually not come at them sideways, but just tease out some things that they could actually, because when I start talking about disciple making and 5 V's and that kind of stuff, this one guy goes, oh yeah, that's really helpful. So he wasn't so much into joining a huddle, but he really caught on to what I was doing, what I would do in a huddle anyway. So it was like, okay, I've got to figure out how to work around this. Okay, so that's the one kind of huddle with the disciple making leaders, but another one will be, I think I will be starting another huddle with pastors. And I know that there are 3 pastors that are just going, when can we start? When can we start?
Okay.
So that's a classic Way of Jesus scope and sequence huddle. And then the disciple making huddles. And then I have my one huddle that I'm into 1.5 years on, and then my RMA huddle.
Okay. How many do you anticipate potentially in that pastor's huddle? The new one.
1, 2, 3, 5-ish. Yeah.
That's great.
Because I've done the ask for 3, 4. And so I'm just kind of waiting till January. I just said, hey, in the new year, we'll do that.
Great. Love it. How many of these people that are already in your various huddles are leading huddles?
In my huddle that on my overviews huddle right now, I have 3 leaders in there and 2 are leading huddles. One is leading a second huddle, but COVID just cut right into that. So it kind of fell off by the way. So he's not leading that huddle, but he's leading another huddle. And my third guy is wanting to huddle, and he has already named the 3 guys he's wanting to huddle.
Good.
But he always, what do they need in order to launch? I think what I need to do with this particular leader in my huddle is to help him with expectations, because he's just like a thoroughbred. He just wants go, 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 go. But I'm thinking he's got to actually settle down, and he's got to figure out what does my huddling with them actually look like that's going to work, because his expectations for huddle might not be what it will actually end up being.
Yeah.
So calibrate expectations is a good way to put that for this one guy. So that's the one huddle. They have 2 huddles and one that he wants to start and is trying to figure out, and the other guy couldn't do his other huddle because of COVID.
Great. And I count those too, because I think a failed launch is really important. And even sometimes it might be really helpful to go back with that person in a public huddle setting and say, hey, can we talk about what didn't work? Because what you can mine out of a failed experience could be really helpful for the listeners, but it could be really helpful to validate and celebrate with that person. Man, we really appreciate the risk that you took. You know, now that we know you faced all these circumstantial issues, you may be able to remove some guilt and shame that person carries by unpacking that a little bit more. Or you may discover a weakness and just gently step in and say, you know, I get it. You're realizing that you face relationship dysfunction issues, and that really hindered your ability to form a family. That's really what we're trying to do here. Yeah. And so you might be able to actually coach directly into that, either something that they carry or, you know, affirm them based on the challenges they were facing from the outside.
Yeah. And so the one person, Nathan, who really wants, he's named his guys he wants to huddle with, but he also wants to do family on mission. Mm-hmm. So he's wanting to do both these things at the same time. But what I've really been able to help him walk through is, well, wait a minute, what's Jesus saying to you? Let's do listen, trust, obey. What's God saying to you about this? And with family on mission, he's bumping up against, you know, my wife and I seem to be clashing as to how all this is going to work out. I want her to be on board.
Yeah.
But I think what he's saying is, I want her to be on board with me. But I was able to push back and say, but Nathan, maybe it's your wife who is the key to the next family on mission. So how is she wired? How does she, how is her wiring towards community? And because she is wired as a disciple making leader, but so anyways, I'm in the middle of recalibrating expectations with both family on mission and huddle with this one leader of mine.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So good. Yep. And I think those are the practical realities. Again, notice each of the people that we're huddling are unique individual people with their own stories, their own challenges, their own self-imposed limitations or other imposed limitations. And what we're doing is we're liberating each one of those people to be able to do the highest possible good that they can. And I won't be upset if a person isn't able to do what I thought they would be able to do. I want to discover where they are and just help them take that next step.
Yeah. So another question is, two of my RMA huddle people are meeting regularly with another leader, but it's one-on-one, it's not huddle. So what's the definition of huddle if it's just one? So if it's just one, then it's not huddle. But they are meeting regularly and they are discipling these two are discipling, one is discipling two and the other's discipling one. So, but it's not huddle necessarily.
Again, I think, just like I said, I've had leaders who did what they were familiar with, which is more small group, but they wanted to make it like a huddle. I've had that same thing too, where the hindrance is, I've got one guy and I'm used to doing one-on-one, so I'm going to do that. I would validate it. It's not quite what I'd want. I would just kind of poke and prod and provoke that kairos of Jesus did this in groups.
Yeah.
We want to walk in his way. And, and then you talk about like, you could have so much more impact, but again, you're probably dealing with, they feel comfortable doing that.
Well, the reality is these disciple making leaders are the 4 C's, filter 1, filter 2, but the third one, they're like an L2. not an L10.
Yeah.
So again, how do you move them from L2 to an L10 leader? And that's kind of where I'm at right now. The other interesting dynamic right now is that the huddle that I'm at right now, that's year and a half, that they have their huddles as well. There's 2.5 huddles coming out of that one. And that is, the next steps, because we've worked through the Way of Jesus sequence, and I was going to jump into disciple making leaders. No, I was going to jump into developing missional communities. But here's what they did. They put the brakes on me. And they said, okay, we have really worked around this disciple making leader square. And we've gone from D1 to D2. We've been clunky. I've asked them to teach the triangle, the circle, the abiding, all kinds of. They said, you know what? Can we go on a journey to L3 and D3 together?
Yep.
So they actually recalibrated where I was going with my huddle, and they said, can we now go back to the beginning of Way of Jesus scope and sequence, and can we lead it?
Yep.
And I'm going, okay, looks like there's our next 6-month sequence where they said, hey, assign me marker 1, and I'll take us through marker 1 so that I can move from clunky to move through conscious incompetence to conscious competence. And so they actually held me to this disciple making leader matrix.
So helpful.
And I'm thinking, okay, guys, that's awesome, because they want to get much better at D3.
Yeah, that's a gift right there. And again, similar to what Claren was saying. Excuse me. And I think that's helpful that they tipped their hand and were willing to be able to share usually what we don't want to share. I need help here.
Yeah.
And you may, depending upon the numbers, hey, let's add 1 or 2 guys and invite them to invite a person of peace into it. Give them the chance to practice that. That may give you a little bit more
interesting
people in the group, and you may be seeding a new group of people for the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and one of them said, and you actually need to get better at D3, because my releasing, you do, I help. I'm okay, but you do, I watch, just drives me nuts. So they said, we'll get better at D3, but we're going to watch you get better at L3 and L4.
That's so good. And something that you may do, Lynn, is intentionally skip a meeting. So that may be good for you. So let's say that we're going to meet in the next month's time frame. They're already queued up. They're used to leading these. But then the day before, you call them and you say, hey, something came up. I'm not going to be able to be there today. Honestly, that is one of the best L4 practices that you could do, because you throw them under the bus at the last minute. They've got to do it without you there. And you're intentionally flexing that muscle to realize, I don't have to be at every single one of these things.
Yeah. And in fact, I did that. I just off 2 weeks vacation, and I said, okay, guys, you guys meet, and then report back to me what you did. And so my main guy just sent me an email yesterday saying, here's what we did over these 2 weeks.
Yep.
So,
and depending upon the personality makeup, so like some people that I know that have a need to understand where they're going to go, and they need that structure, a little bit more like what the heck is it on Myers-Briggs? The J on the Myers-Briggs. Some people need that to know how to step into it. I might plan that, absence with them. Hey, I'm going to be gone 2 weeks from now. I need you to do it. But I find most people, even if they are strong J's, need to deal with the pressure of, oh, this is all on me right now. That's actually a really helpful thing for them to go through.
Yeah.
Okay, I am now going back. You've noticed this to just itemize how many you guys are working through, like in the season right now. Let me see if I can do this. One more. So let's say I'm going to count 3 huddles, even though one of those has failed and one of them is still on the horizon. I think that's close enough to count it for right now. And then what I see in the future.
Well, that would be 4. The one guy has, 2 guys have 2 huddles. One guy is wanting to start, and then the other guy had one that didn't go. So yeah.
Lynn would be leading 3. And then that's what we didn't get to, Lynn, in yours. How many do you think in the near season you might anticipate launched huddles that you're not leading?
Well, right now the huddles that are launched that I'm not leading is 1, 2. There's 2, and then these other RMAs that are mentoring these other leaders. I'm not sure we would count that, but yeah, that will be starting.
Yeah.
That I'm not involved in. Well, a total, as I look for 2021, there's going to be 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Great.
I think.
Good. So what I'm trying to do here with my numeric system, the first one is how many are you leading at this point? The second number is how many are being led already that you're not leading. So your huddle leads are leading this. So Brian, from what I'm seeing, is leading 3. 12 huddles are launched kind of under his umbrella already. He's looking at increasing it to 2 more huddles, possibly 4, to lead 4 or 5 total. That's kind of the max. So that's why I just left it at the 5 versus the 4 to 5. And then there potentially would be 16 huddles under him, the way that I'm understanding kind of my notes and what I heard from him. Clarendon, he's leading 2. 7 huddles are happening right now underneath his leadership that he's not leading. He's looking at adding a new one, so he'll be at 3. And then I couldn't quite make out because I was listening and trying to calculate, but this is like a goal number. So Clarendon, I'll invite you into it, just like I did with Lynn. How many do you think in 2021, looking back at the end of 2021, you would have been launched by people that you've been huddling?
New, or does that include the 7?
You can include the 7. That's what I did with Brian. So I left the 12 and added 4 more to it. And so you could take the 7 and add however many more you think you would add to it.
So I would, by the end of the year, I would hope that there would be 6.
Awesome. And then Lynn, now that I've kind of walked through that system, let's double check to make sure I've got my numbers right here. You're currently leading 2. There are 4 being led that aren't, and even that includes the failure that were launched under you that you weren't leading. You're looking at adding an additional 1, and then are you saying 4 more? So that would be an 8, or?
No, I would say that 4 would go to a 5.
Great.
If I'm looking back at the end of 2021, there would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah.
And 5. So then this 4 is correct.
Yeah.
And then this would, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Now what we're looking at here, these are important metrics. And man, there's so much to celebrate here. You know, the idea that you guys are currently leading just, and this is without John's input here as well, that you're currently leading 7 huddles, and look at how fruitful those huddles have been. You're looking at 23 huddles that are, launching. This is movemental stuff. Those are the types of things that you want to be doing. So let me even just put these back here. So out of you guys, currently you're leading 7 amongst yourselves. 23 have been launched by you guys, but then you're looking at in the near future that you would have 5, 8, 11 huddles that you guys would have been kind of launching and leading. And then you would have, 29 and 34. Again, those are, imagine what it's going to be like when you get a year later. You're now on the cusp of 2022, and you're, okay, here's what we hoped to do. Here's what we actually did. Now where will we be? You know, really, you're going to end up, this number is likely going to settle at some point. That how many will we be leading on an average basis? You're going to reach a natural capacity limitation. Some of you will discover you have the capacity to lead more. Others of you, and it will be no blame, I can lead 3 really well, but when I move into 4, I don't do it as well. You're going to play around with, like Brian's doing, local versus kind of regional too, so that you're going to deal with those different things. You know, hey, you're going to discover when I lead an in-person huddle at the local level, we meet for 2 hours, not 1 hour. It takes a lot more time just because the face-to-face, all that happens. But I mean, imagine this number here is likely going to be in the 50 plus realm. And then you're, you know, technically you're going to have to then begin adding this. How many huddles, you know, this is 3rd tier huddle. How many huddles are being led now that my huddlees aren't leading? It's their huddlees are leading. You know, this is going to start small. We're at 10 right now, but it's going to have massive amounts of possibilities of increasing more and more. And at this point, when you guys are here moving into 2022, there's going to be a lot that you guys will have gained by leading whatever the number of huddles that is. These people are going to carry a wealth of information. You're going to have not only, you know, the 4 of you and your own personalities. You're going to have, you know, small church leaders. You're going to have big church leaders. You're going to have youth ministries. You're going to have secular workplace people. There's going to be a wealth of people that will be in that category. And then these will be like spiritual grandchildren of yours. You may come into contact with them, and they may have heard your name, so to speak, but you may not have regular touch points with them. This is a different leadership style, but if as a denomination, you have all of this going on, by the time you lead your big annual meeting and you've got this many people talking the same language, playing with the same tools, then your annual conferences that deal with similar things but push the envelope further, you're going to be able to take even more and more ground. And so I really just want to affirm, I'm hearing so strongly, you're going the direction that you guys desire to be able to go. What you'll run into is this. I know that you guys are at different stages of looking at future retirement, and I get it. You're probably carrying the idea, I'm not going to retire from you know, disciple making, but I may retire from my job as RM. That's great. You're going to need to deal with that. But no matter what, there's going to be a point where this process will potentially get stilted if this retirement plan doesn't include how will we account for that, which I know you're doing with RMs and, or I'm sorry, with your
RMAs.
You're thinking those things, but this will be one of those future hurdles that could really derail what you're building and is so commendable. All right, any other thoughts? I know we're over by a few minutes.
Can you tell us where the fountain of life is so we can be younger?
Yeah, his name is Jesus. I hear you.
You know, man, if we would have known this stuff when we started pastoring,
right?
It'd be so different.
I hear you. But the good thing
Here
is,
we are now.
Yeah, you're doing so much for the existing and future generations of leaders in a whole denomination. So there's so much at stake. And I know you guys know that already, but there's so much at stake. And so, you know, retirement is an L3, L4 leadership style. And there's a way to do it well, and there's a way to do it poorly. And so as you do that, you really are setting up a good foundation for others. And here's one of the things I've noticed. This isn't like across the board how it should be done, but usually one of the problems that arises with L3 and L4, even in just a local huddle, Lynn kind of spoke to this to some degree, I don't get out of the way soon enough. And even kind of with retirement, that may be one of the challenges that you guys face. It may be that you need to get out of the way sooner than it's financially helpful for you. And that's where you're trying to calibrate. How do I do this for my family, for myself personally? How do I do this at a, you know, truly movemental kingdom layer? And usually there's that stuff that comes into play at a real practical level. So, all right, friends, great to be with you. We'll be back next week, and we'll take it a couple steps further.
Thanks, Michael.
Oh,
Thank you.
awesome.
Bye.